Today, I'm going to be diving deep into a game that I personally believe that will become the new #1 MMORPG in the upcoming years, Ashes of Creation. This game appears to be led by an excellent group of individuals who proven time and time again to share my personal ideals for an MMO. They have been incredibly active with the community, and the way they are approaching the pre-release of this game is extraordinary. Steven has been extremely interactive with the community, whether it be on Reddit, in Discord, answering questions in text and both in voice chat, reaching out to streamers and content creators, and he's just been doing an absolutely phenomenal job. I personally have never witnessed another creative director do this with any community. To me, it really speaks volumes. In several interviews, Steven also stated that he does look at nearly every comment in the community and content creator and takes all the time to read feedback and make decisions based on what the fan wants. With that being said, make sure you give their feedback on anything you do or don't like about the information given in this video. Stick around to the end and feel free to give your feedback on any information that already exists and is factual, or any of my feedback that I think would be good if it would be implemented into the game. Do mind, this game is still pre-alpha, just about to go into alpha 1 stages, and a lot of the graphics and abilities and everything still have yet to be fine-tuned. But I will be relaying most of your comments to the community, and soon I will take all the feedback and make a separate video responding to all of the questions or giving any feedback I can for the comments and questions presented to myself, as well as any updates on the game's status from the date of posting. I plan on dedicating myself to this game for so long that I will get every drop except a girl's pants. But in this video, I will attempt to break down all of the information I've received in the most simplistic, easy to understand format that I can personally do. There may be some gamer lingo used in this video that may not be easy to understand to beginner gamers, but I will try to avoid that as much as possible. Sometimes I don't actually realize I'm using terminology that not everyone understands yet. If you've never had the chance to play a brand new MMORPG at launch, the feeling is absolutely amazing. Like, I get nostalgic feelings, and I miss the way I used to feel playing an MMO for the first time, like when my friends, told me about it back in elementary school and everything, and I first got into like classic WoW. And that was probably one of my first games, and Steven and the development team, they actually want to recapture that feeling. Aside from the nostalgia and everything else, the feeling is absolutely amazing to know you're at the chance to be at the tip of the curve and for your whole existence to not have to be a sad game of catch-up. One really important piece of information I do want to say is Steven does not support any type of pay-to-win aspects, like no loot boxes. Anything in the cash drop will be purely for cosmetics and no personal gain. This game will be anti-whale and will be more focused on how much time you spend invested into the game, not based on how many of your mom's credit cards you have stolen. Compiling all of this information and studying the interviews and giving you the best source of information to date honestly has not been easy. If you would like to support myself as a content creator and the game developers, make sure to use my referral link down in the description. It costs nothing extra and it helps me a ton. I greatly appreciate every single one of you that uses it in advance. Additionally, anybody that signs up using the referral code before September of 2020 receives a free in-game item. Please also be aware, if you use a cookie blocker or an ad blocker on your device, the referral link will not work properly, and your referral code must be entered manually. In order for it to process correctly, all of the information you need to enter it manually will be linked down in the description. Pre-ordering the game also gives you a ton of benefits as well. I personally chose the pre-order because of being able to reserve my name and making sure I can reserve my server that I choose to play on. There will very likely be servers that get locked out due to max capacity within the first 10 minutes due to streamer influences and large guilds wanting to compete with each other on the same server. Most high-end guilds are already requiring you to have the ability to reserve your spot for the proper server in order to be accepted into the guild. Steven has also mentioned giving the ability before official launch to customize your character details, which I think is really cool. This was so you can spend as much time as you would like and be able to fully customize your character before launch to be able to get into the game the second the servers come up. For those of you who know me from BDO, you know we ended up splitting parties on day one because the hardcore players wanted the extra 5 to 10 minutes just of rushing content to be the first there, ahead of the people that wanted to spend in-depth time for their character creation, which I personally also like customizing my character, but to me at the time that extra 5-minute advantage was everything I needed and wanted, so I actually skipped out on character creation. So I think this is actually a really cool feature because it allows us to do both. First and foremost, Ashes of Creation is a Western-made sandpark MMO that is heavily focused on PvX. A sandpark MMO, as Steven likes to call it, is a well-balanced mixture between the common sandbox and theme park style MMOs. You can expect to see some dedicated routes to take, as well as the ability to play the game however you want to choose to and at your own pace. This game is expected to have a more hardcore dedicated player style, while yet still being casual friendly to not scare new players away. Additionally, having both PvE and PvP content ranging all the way from beginners to hardcore playstyle. This game was initially kickstarted 3 years ago, but was already fully funded to full completion from private investments like Steven. And Steven is such a down-to-earth, humble guy who seems to have the most passion for MMOs that I've seen in a really long time. Even though I'll go over all of the information he has given the community so far in this video and my upcoming videos, I highly suggest you to go back and check out some of his interviews to see his passion and his excitement for yourself. Unlike most games of this genre we have seen lately, from day one, there will be no pay to win in this game. There will be no box cost subscription fee business model. Much like RuneScape, for those of you who are familiar, this means all players will have access to all content without having the quality of life features hawked behind an obnoxious paywall like we have seen in Black Desert. The cash shop will actually be purely cosmetic, which makes me insanely happy and excited and hopeful to see if they live up to that promise. I'm honestly tired of playing with friends and them not being able to explore the same content as me due to hidden paywalls, or get demotivated by a whale that spends over $200,000 on a game in the first 2 months just to be the strongest in the game. From what I've gathered so far, this game seems to be combining all the best aspects from every MMO in the past 20 years into a single MMO, while also creating an entirely new atmosphere that has never been seen before. We are going to see a lot of new aspects imported from WoW, node systems similar to BDO, a plethora of content relatable to Arcade and Lineage 2, and even some aspects that remind me of Rift in Guild Wars 2 with a risk and reward system like RuneScape. The most unique feature of this game is hands down the node system. Across the map there are a total of 103 different node locations or points of interest on the map. These nodes are areas that can progress to different levels of development as player activity rises in that area. Activity can be gained by killing monsters, quests, or gathering, and is a collective amongst all players. Starting out day one, you will basically be given a nearly empty template that can and will be constructed by the community's choices as a whole. As you and the community participate in activities in that area will exceed experience points to the corresponding area's node. As an area or a node receives more experience, that area will develop an expedition with quests as more players are drawn to that area. It will level up into an encampment eventually, generating even more quests and NPCs. As the encampment and areas level up, this will grant much more opportunity to the community for that area. Eventually, this zone could potentially level up into a giant city called a metropolis with nearly endless opportunity and world events, with brand new quests and NPC appearing at each advancing stage. It is slightly confusing, and that is the simplest way I could possibly put it. Going deeper into the node system, there are millions of variables that could take place. Remember how I said before about there being 103 different points of interest? Well, each area your community decides to level will dictate the quests and world events available to be triggered upon development. Now, you're probably thinking that's not too complicated, right? You could just go finish off one city at a time like every other MMO. Well, that's wrong. It's actually not possible for each and every node to hit max level simultaneously. As one node levels up beyond certain breakpoints, it locks the possibility for adjacent nodes to grow to the same size. In order to change this outcome and generate new content and possibilities, players will need to participate in a PvP node siege, much like the sieges in Black Desert for taking over the castle if you are familiar. The logic behind this is the node has to be de-leveled and the size reduced in order for the nodes next to it to grow. Think of it like a real-life area. You couldn't possibly turn every single small town in your area into a thriving city. There just isn't enough surface area. So you would have to destroy one city in order to make a new one. Each new city can provide different and unique content for new players and hardcore players alike. The way the system is designed intends for long-term player replayability. Each server will be completely different than the next. Different communities will be able to choose to build nodes in different order to prioritize different things. I think this can be extremely beneficial for a gaming community and can force people to communicate and come together. On the downside, I think this could potentially get a lot of video game politics involved, much like Black Desert, and it could potentially be bad. This could potentially also make it harder for new players to learn the game because not every server will have the same content, so they won't be able to look up exact guides on YouTubes or forums to help them progress better. Some players might like this though, since not every single server will be cookie cutter and everybody will have a different playstyle. This is what Steven actually intends for, so that not everybody will want to do the same thing and that a MMO for the first time in a long time will actually be immersive again. On top of the functionality, the aesthetics will also be unique and ever-changing, which I also find absolutely amazing to even think about. Is each node levels up in advancement, it will take the appearance of the related race that contributed the most experience to its development. For example, let's say the most recent node leveled up and the race contributed to the most was the dwarves. It would have a dwarven vibe to it. I think this is actually a cool feature and could be planned by the community to make some pretty interesting looking zones. In addition to the aesthetics and the level of the development to the node, there will also be 4 different node types. Each of these 4 node types will have a different functionality, bringing different benefits depending on which type it is. The 4 different types are divine, economic, military, and scientific. Furthermore, these nodes exist in certain regions that will dictate what marketplace that node is a part of and what warehouse cluster that node belongs to, as well as what crafting tier the node exists in. Different nodes will fall under different influences that will also affect the node's development. The zone type for the node will affect the government type in the buildings of the node, as well as the content generated from that node's progression. As I'm sure you can see by now, the node system is actually the backbone of the game's systems. It is also important to note that after a node has advanced to the next stage, it is no longer possible to develop its neighboring nodes unless that node is sieged and destroyed. Currently, as a node develops, it will have 6 progressive stages of development. The progression time of these stages are based on the activity of the players. Expedition take about a few hours. An encampment will take many hours. A village will take a few days. A town is expected to take many days. A city is expected to take a few weeks, and a metropolis, that's expected to actually take many weeks. Upon reaching the village stage of development, each of these nodes will have 1 week cooldown before the system for node election begins again. During elections, players can aim to become mayor of a node. As the mayor, you get to allocate all the resources, set tax rates, and initiate quests to advance that node. This format pretty much reminds me of leading a guild in most MMOs, or specifically most recent Black Desert. Mayors will get to choose different building projects that will determine the way it advances and its benefits. The election system also varies depending on node type. Economic nodes will have elected official seats that are purchased and sold by the citizens for in-game currency or to the highest bidder. Economic nodes will have unique buildings of trade and commerce. If an economic node becomes a metropolis, it will have a superpower of a linked economy. If that happens, the node's economy will be linked with all the other nodes in your metropolis vassal system. This is actually really important and useful since Ashes of Creation will not have a global auction house. Divine nodes will be determined by a player that does the most service quests related to the node. The further details of this node type are still being updated, and I'll make it a video explaining these specifically when I get the information and the details are developed. Military node mayors will be decided by a Battle Royale game mode. This is probably the one I'll attempt personally, as it's one of my favorite style of games. However, there is a twist. Players will use a champion through an interface rather than their own created character. There are a few details about military nodes so far. However, we do know there will be a bounty hunter quest and a system to go along with it, which really excites me. I'm hoping these work similar to the RuneScape bounty system. Another side effect of having a military node is the reduced duration of corruption while in military node. This could be extremely useful, and I'll get deeper into the corruption and everything we know in a later video. Scientific nodes will have a system related to the democratic election by the citizens. This node will have a unique building related to learning and education. As this node increases to a metropolis, it will gain the ability to have limited fast travel, and you can teleport between the nodes. One of the only methods of fast travel comes from a scientific node. If you are a citizen of the metropolis itself, you can teleport to and from the metropolis or any of the vassal nodes attached to it. If you are a citizen of one of the vassal nodes, you can teleport to the metro and back to your node. If there's a time where 2 or more scientific metropolises exist in the world, there will be an airship that connects the two, creating a method of fast travel across a sizable portion of the world for citizens of the metro and its vassals. Now, obviously, sometimes mayors may be in the hands of players who quit, are toxic, or, any other issues that can arise. So every month, the election process will happen all over, so other players have a chance to challenge the mayor for their spot. Now, I know this is a whole lot of information about nodes and the systems, but as we can see already, nodes themselves are the foundation and the center of civilization in Ashes of Creation. Pretty much any topic involves nodes, from PvE to PvP, raiding, life skills, and professions. Everything is based on nodes, which are a direct result of players' actions and decisions. When the game begins, other than the starting zone, the world would be barren, ready for development. Unlike other games that follow a theme park layout, this has a nice sandbox feel to it while still having some theme park tendencies. Everything you do in this game, though, somehow relates to nodes. You want your own housing, your node has to be a certain level. You want to node siege, your node also has to be a certain level. You want to access the trade market, well, your node has to be a certain level. At first, the whole node system in Ashes will be extremely complicated. It's going to be a bit overwhelming for all of us. This is intentional, as Steven wants to ensure that players will have both control in development and its destruction. Unlike most games where players start at a starting zone, Ashes of Creation has no predetermined path, because zones and nodes don't have a level. There isn't a level 10 and 35 zone. Instead, each zone is its own mini encounter. In the very beginning, there is nothing but wilderness. As a player moves into an area, they bring civilization with it. Near civilization, you will find easier monsters and lower threat. As you go deeper into the wilderness away from civilization, you will find much greater dangers as well. So each zone will have a proper range of enemies for the players to confront. This could make low-level world exploring tedious at first, but I'm definitely excited to see how this all plays out. This type of node system created by Ashes of Creation prevents the inevitable situation of other MMORPGs where a player who was not present at launch of a server spends the majority of their time grinding to max level and rarely encounters any other human players during the grind. Instead, with the node's concept, new players will encounter populated areas with a variety of players of all levels shortly after leaving the starting area. There is a lot more information to go over for nodes, however, I'm not going to dive any deeper at the moment until we get a better look into alpha testing. Once I'm able to get my hands into alpha and experience everything for myself, I'll make a separate video entirely on the node system and all the ins and outs of the node breakdown. I'd like to cover all that today, but I wouldn't want to waste your time covering information that is more than likely going to be changed in the near future. Now, in the scenario that I do not get my hands on an Alpha 1 testing invite, we will have to wait until I get my hands on Alpha 2. But Alpha 2 at the very latest will be when I update you guys with a full video. Other than its in-depth node system, Ashes of Creation is aiming to have an extremely diverse range of content to appeal to every style of player and provide long-term replayability. There will be endless PvE encounters that will be different in different zones and on different servers, and tons of PvP, including open world content. You'll be able to open world flag, much like in a sense of BDO or Bless Unleashed. There will be caravans, PvP, duels, battlegrounds, guild wars, arena, siege nodes, and possibly some other future content. I know there's a large portion of players that also do not like PvP and would rather fish and chop trees and kill dragons with your friends. That's okay too. You'll be glad to know that Ashes will have a punishment system to prevent griefing. This is developed in their corruption system, which works in a way like BDO's karma system. There was initial concern about people getting baited for losing their materials by players baiting to their higher level friends. That system is already being prevented by not being able to attack low players accidentally. I personally worried about PvP based people using low level body blockers while attacking players and trying to get the low levels killed in order for their target to go red and lose gear. You will not unintentionally be able to tag non-tagged players, and killing a tagged player will not make you go red. If a player comes up to you and just slaughters you, they will become corrupted or gain a sense of corruption. Now, in the scenario that you are gathering a material, it is highly encouraged that you fight back. You will lose less materials if you do fight back against that player in the scenario that you die, or if you kill that other player, you could potentially gain some of their resources and not die at all. So it is incredibly encouraged. However, if you are being harassed and you just want that person to leave you alone, if you do not fight back, that player will gain towards some corruption. However, you will lose more material. Eventually, a player can potentially become so corrupted that once killed, they actually drop some of their items, which can be looted by the players that kill them, much like RuneScape's Wilderness system. They also lose increasingly more experience on death as well. On top of that, in order to prevent players from going perma-red, like they did in BDO, you will increasingly lose stats the deeper into corruption you go. So you will get a passive debuff for the more players that you kill. On top of this game will have a bounty system where players with high corruption score will appear on the map for bounty hunters to track down and kill for rewards. Guards will also attack corrupted players on site, and the guards are extremely overpowered to counter players, much like in other games. There were initial concerns about players being able to hide their difficulty or strength by using cosmetics in PvP. There's actually already a system to prevent this, and when hovering over a player or at a glance, as Steven likes to say, you will be able to see their level as well as their type of gear they're wearing, as icons by their nameplate, as well as color coordination for their tier of gear as well. The caravan system in Ashes is designed to emphasize risk versus reward gameplay, which I personally love. For those of you who have been in my content for a while or have seen me stream on Twitch, you've probably heard how much I miss there being a risk and reward system in games. Due to storage being localized to each node and different areas across the map, having easier or harder access to certain resources, players will need to transport goods between certain nodes via caravans, much like the transport system in BDO. When a caravan is spawned, it will create a moving open world PvP zone where players can approach the caravan. They'll be given 3 options, either to attack, defend, or ignore the caravan. These caravans can also transport goods from more than one player at a time. I can see this being a thing where merc guilds are established and require payment for protection or destruction of caravans of their targets. I can also see this potentially having people camp in the known caravan locations and wait for them. In the scenario that you DC or have to log off, your caravan will still progress even with you offline, but from my understanding can still be attacked. Castle sieges will take place once a month. Guilds will be able to fight 250 versus 250 in a battle to become the dominant guild and take control of one of the 5 castles across the world. Obviously, some castles will become a priority over other castles, much like BDO. These are the castles that the top guild will probably fight for. These sieges can last up to 2 hours if the defending side wins. The node level will also determine how long until a node can be attacked again. For example, a low-level village can be attacked every 20 days, while a fully developed metro cannot be attacked for 50 days until after successfully defending it. On top of that, once a siege is declared, many of the node's abilities will become temporarily disabled in prep for war. For villages, there's about a 2-day notice, while a fully built metro will be a 5-day notice. So with that being said, if the other levels of nodes follow this pattern, there will be a 1 day of prep for every 10 days the node cannot be attacked. Much like the style of BDO, there will be a dedicated time frame during the server's prime time in which sieges can be attacked. This gives nearly every guild a fair chance to fight for the castle. Now, with this being said, it'll be relevant to the server in which you pick. For example, if you pick an East Coast North American server, it will go off of prime time of what would be on the East Coast in North America. In the event that a node is conquered and not defended, the node will be reset to level 0, and the players with resources stored in that node will lose some of those resources. So this is going to be something that players are required to choose intelligent places to store their resources or get used to consistently moving them around. This can result in guilds choosing to relocate their entire guild's collection of resources simultaneously, which could ultimately attract other guilds wanting to PvP and take their caravans in event of a collective move. I think this will be extremely interesting to see how it plays out, and player housing will also be destroyed in the process of a node being taken over. Guild wars are another interesting aspect of the game, which allows a guild to declare war on each other, much similar to Black Desert. There will be certain objectives, however, to meet a victory condition, which actually is an amazing improvement over the declare system of BDO. At this moment, this isn't fully developed. However, I think it would be awesome for them to add rewards or incentives for guilds to declare on each other, and different rewards for different scenarios. Like if a guild is 16-0 against other guilds and it's the real powerhouse, the guild to break their record gets insanely better rewards. Or maybe even in the scenario that a smaller underdog guild beats a bigger guild. From the looks of it, guilds will be able to wage war on multiple guilds at once, and much like the karma system in BDO, corruption will not be gained for killing players you're currently at war with. Other aspects of PvP we have to look forward to are duels and battlegrounds. Duels are pretty self-explanatory, not much to really cover here. At the moment, I am not sure if duels will be able to be held anywhere, or if they will only be able to be done in certain zones, like in RuneScape Duel Arena or inside cities or safe zones. One thing I think would be awesome for them to introduce would be staking of some sort, whether it be for gear, resources, or currency. Maybe even risk some experience or a different currency. I would really appreciate them bringing some kind of wager or risk into dueling in this game. In Battlegrounds, I'm honestly interested to see what this brings. There is so much they could do with this. Out of every game I've played though, I think WoW's Battleground system was probably one of the best. Especially in the old days. I miss there being different genres of active battlegrounds, like Capture the Flag, Domination, a mix of the two like Eye of the Storm, and of course Altered Valley, which holds some of my best memories and the most time spent even to this day. Such an amazing design combining looting, gathering, PvP, and PvE, and bossing all into a single match. I also would like a title and currency grind that can be established only from Battlegrounds or PvP. Even if the currency had no other uses aside from exclusive cosmetics or mounts, I think it would still be an extra grind worth giving to the communities. Now, arenas. One of my favorite aspects of a video game of all times. Anybody who has watched any of my content previously has definitely heard about me wanting ranked PvP. I miss pushing Gladiator, I miss small scale arena. I miss having to perfect every move and know every encounter and predict what was going to happen before it happened. I really hope there's ranked PvP with leaderboards and exclusive titles and cosmetics to go with it. I think a game needs it, personally. At the moment, there is no plan for this exact system, which greatly saddens me, but I think if we tie some sort of story into it and develop a ranked coliseum of some sort, I think it would be awesome. Maybe we can make it so players that only own military nodes can participate in these ranked arenas to promote fighting over military nodes and stuff as well. As far as PvP goes, though, to me, it sounds like Ashes will have everything most people have ever wanted and dreamed of in an MMO, and I have extremely high hopes for the PvP and overall creation of this game, and honestly, I'm so excited to dive into playing it and the upcoming testing stages. Now, for all the PvE players, both casual and hardcore, don't worry. There's just as much exciting, if not more exciting, content for the PvE crowd in Ashes creation. The PvE side has many standard features that you'll find in most games, like zone exploration quests, instance dungeons, world bosses, and stuff like that. On top of these, there are also many forms of PvE content like open world dungeons, open world raids, monster coin events, and all of the events related and unique to node growth and deconstruction. For those of you who thoroughly enjoy your standard instances and dungeons, Ashes will focus primarily on dungeons and raids consisting of group sizes 8, 16, and 40, both in open world instance and raids. Upon official release of the game, they are planning for about 80% of the dungeons and raids to be open world, with the other 20% being instance. This will be quite interesting to experience firsthand. Different classes will have unique abilities called utility skills that will have different benefits in certain dungeons or environments. For example, a rogue will have access to hidden rooms that only rogues can see, and a ranger will be able to use track find to be able to see traps and extra treasure. I think this is actually really unique, and I personally have not played an MMO that has done this before, and I'm actually really excited to that feature. Now, as far as experience gain goes, experience gain while in a party will be divided based on the number of party members, with an additional multiplier based on the number of players in the party in order to keep the XP per hour relevant. For example, a 3-person party will get 33% of the original XP with about a 1.3 times multiplier, but you'll be killing things roughly at 3 times the speed, so if your entire party is performing at max efficiency, you could potentially earn even more XP due to the multiplier, given that the area is high density mob with a fast respawn rate. Looting as it stands is based on single target interaction with no AoE looting. I personally feel this is one of the only downfalls of the game at the moment, and hoping they change this in the future. Looting is based on overall DPS done to a monster with some effect to it tagging. For example, tagging holds weight, so if both players do 50% damage, the person that tagged the mob would get the loot. This ratio is said to be right around 40% to 60% ratio, meaning whoever tagged the monster, if they did 40% or more, they would get the loot. If they did 40% or less, the other person would get the loot that did more than 60% damage. I personally feel like AoE looting or auto loot on kill would make the game a little bit better. This could be even obtained later in the game, maybe a crafted item required to be in your inventory, or like a world boss drop, or maybe even a temporary food buff or a potion. The options are really endless, but I do think the loot system does need improved. Having to manually loot every mob definitely slows down progression more than most people realize, because you are faced with a decision to make. Do I gather where I can perform that action and get my loot simultaneously, or do I kill mobs? Killing mobs requires me to fight, land the kill, then run to my target and loot it, and then target the next mob. Mechanics like DOT builds and melee builds have a significant advantage over ranging builds. Melee is already in distance to loot upon kill, and dot builds can tag everything in sight and pull to a center location and let them die from the dot damage over time. However, the game still has many stages of testing to go, and I have faith that Steven will improve this system from the community feedback. Looting world bosses and raid bosses will be based upon raid group, apparently using the same DPS system. I can see this being a potential issue, because this will basically make powerhouse guilds get all the loot, while none of the lower guys will be able to even get loot. And I don't really support that. Even with myself typically leading or being in the top guilds, I don't want to prevent competition. I want everyone to be eligible to my same loot table. I think generating an RNG system would be better than this. Like, let's say the same loot is dropped by the boss regardless, 6 pieces for example. Make it so the highest DPS players, regardless of raid group, get the highest chance of roll for the best piece, and if they fail that roll, move to the next piece and so on. This would apply differently for different tiers of DPS, like the top 10% gets the highest rolls, maybe the next top 35% gets the second best rolls, and top 60% gets the third best, and the rest of the people get some rolls with the lowest tier. This would encourage players to fully buff and perform their absolute best at world bosses, instead of leeching their way into a raid group or paying resources or even real world trading for raid spots in an attempt to get loot. I think having a raid leader in charge of a world boss loot can also lead to many issues. He can steal everything for himself and just make a different character that no one knows. Ninja looting is a serious issue with things like this. We can also reach a point in the game where most players are max gear and they invite people into the raid and do like a DKP or a real world trading system, and the boss pieces get auctioned off and go to the highest bidder for each piece. In my opinion, all these systems we greatly want to avoid, and that alone can kill the whole desire and willingness to do world bosses. I'm not sure what system they'll end up settling for, but in my opinion, it needs to be different, or people will basically be prevented of open world content and basically restricted to instance events where they can't get bullied by powerhouse guilds, preventing their loot and progression. As far as inventory goes, the initial inventory space will be fairly limited, but additional inventory space can be achieved from certain in-game items through node progression and certain quest lines. This inventory space will be broken into different categories. Having quest items will not fill your non-quest item inventory slots or vice versa. Inventory and weight limit will not be purchased through the cash shop and can only be earned through in-game progression. Weight limit seems like it won't be much of a problem here, as resources are not subject to weight limit, as they are their own individual inventory space. Backpacks will also be used in the format of WoW. Higher level backpacks obtained through crafting or other sources will have more inventory space. Different backpacks for different things can potentially have more space, but be limited to only those type of items. Like a gatherer's backpack can hold more gatherables, but only those items. And an adventurer's backpack can hold more consumables, but only those items. Now, there's no current information on this, but by the sounds of this, we'll be able to have multiple different backpack slots at once, similar to how WoW did it, when they had one primary backpack and 4 additional slots that you could customize and change which backpacks you held. Item stacks will vary depending on item, and there are really no set values yet, and I'll update you in a later video when I have more information on that topic. There will be other forms of transport and storage as well. Mules will be able to be obtained and used. Mules hold roughly 10 times more than inventory, and caravans hold roughly 100 times more than mules. Quest experience is not divided and will remain static numbers. The XP division is only applied to monsters and raid bosses. There will be no group finder in Ashes, which I strongly agree with. This encourages people to actually be communicating with the community, getting in Discord or guilds, and not having to worry about getting some random that is just going to AFK through your entire session. I also really like the way dungeons and raids work in this game, where they will increase in difficulty based on how the group interacts with them, and makes the dungeons harder but fair to the players playing them. With increased difficulty comes increased reward, so the same dungeon can essentially be repeated to provide new gear upgrade every time if your RNG were to allow it. Each dungeon increases in difficulty. There are not only stronger mechanics, but more mechanics as well, which I also think this is an amazing feature. There will be 12 to 15 world bosses upon initial release, with even more regional and dungeon bosses. Legendary equipment will only be able to be dropped from legendary bosses. Depending on the requirements and the difficulty level, the loot tables will vary. Steven has stated many times that he wants this game to be something that rewards dedication and accomplishments, and does not want everything to be a participation trophy, which I'm really excited for. I'm tired of games giving out everything to a player within the first 3 weeks to a month of them being end game and everybody getting bored with the game because there's no more content. Not all PvE content will be accessible to all players or on all servers at the same time though. The PvE counters are based off of the current node structure for the server. This is actually quite interesting and can help deter certain gear or builds being meta. There will be no add-ons for those of you curious. This has been stated multiple times. DPS meters are a very controversial topic, and Steven stated that he does not want them in the game. This is because Steven wants the game to be more immersive and to steer away from the toxic communities basing their entire existence and raid experience off of DPS meter. Many of us decided that an after report sheet for after boss kills or raids would be nice to see, maybe like total damage done, percentage of the health you've contributed to, unnecessary damage taken for mechanics you failed to avoid, what your average crit percentage was, how many hits you missed based off of accuracy, how much extra damage your crits made you do, and stuff like that. I think that would be really good, but only on a personal level and only after raid bosses are done. That way you can keep a lot of the toxicity out of the game while still improving your playstyle every time. We are likely to see a lot of high ranked PvE guilds that also have a strong interest in PvP simply due to the construction and destruction and control over which nodes can progress in order to influence certain raid and dungeons. Another really unique system that I'm excited to see how it plays out is the monster coin system. This system kind of reminds me of Rift in a way, with one really unique aspect. The monster coin allows you to transform into a PvE monster and help defend the event. As far as quests go, the quest in Ashes of Creation will be slightly different than other games in a few senses, and they have 3 primary categories. These categories are event quests, tasks, and narrative quests. Event quests will be triggered by a node being developed or advanced in the world. Successfully completing an event quest could potentially give really rewarding buffs, where failing an event quest could potentially give fairly harmful buffs. Failing an event quest could also spawn a natural disaster which can harm certain regions' progressions or disable node services temporarily. So get your friends and make sure everybody is giving 110% of their effort for these. Task quests are going to be the simplest version of quests, typically pertaining to professions or what most MMOs and players consider side quests. These will be simple gather quests or talk to X quests, and in order to receive rewards or progress a skill. Narrative quests are essentially your story quests, which can transfer over into class quests and character-specific unlocks, much similar to the Black Spirit quests in BDO. Some of these quests are even hidden behind temporary locked content that may currently be inaccessible due to the way the node system is currently being developed, and we'll have to wait until the node system changes months down the road in order to complete that quest. Honestly, I'm not really much of a role player, but I can see this game potentially having a large attraction to the role player crowd, and lots of players who enjoy games like Final Fantasy. One huge thing I think role players will enjoy in this game is Steven plans on making Ash's character creation system even more immersive and in-depth than Black Desert's, and Black Desert is ranked amongst the top character customization to ever be introduced. I'm honestly not even a role player, and I'm pretty excited for this. This game also has an extremely in-depth player housing system, which I briefly touched on before. There are 3 main types of player housing ready to be developed. They are instanced apartments, open world freeholds, and static player housing within nodes. In order to experience player housing, a node must reach village stage or higher. Instance apartments can only be experienced once a mayor of a node decides they want to build apartment buildings inside that node you are trying to access. For those of you who played BDO, this system will be somewhat familiar and shouldn't be too overly complex. You can also visit other people's apartments. Static housing within nodes are your own individual plots of land in which you can place a house and will be visible to everyone. you will be able to place your own selection of decorations and cosmetics in front of your house. I can see this being a really cool feature for people to place PvP trinkets and banners or achievements, maybe like the head of a raid boss or something to show off their progression. You can seamlessly enter and exit your house as well as other players, and you can develop your own little small house or all the way up to a giant mansion. Now, freeholds are essentially an extremely large housing plot that will be outside of cities in more rural or country areas. Due to the incredibly large space, players can only own one of these per account. I'm curious to see how this actually plays out, if all these houses and freeholds will be visible at all times. I could see this getting really cluttered in some areas or being really hard to navigate. Apartments and houses are limited to one per server as well. In your freehold, you can place many buildings to help benefit or assist your progression. This will essentially be your profession and life scaling hub at the moment, and probably essential for quality life management early game. In the scenario that a node is destroyed while your house is in it, you'll be mailed a template so you could basically copy and paste your house back to a new location without worrying about the stress and time consumption of fully redecorating. I'm really excited for all the PvE and PvP content this game has to offer, and it's still in the early development stages. I'm going to be updating my page consistently as I learn more when it develops. The one thing I really would like to see in this MMO is a hardcore server. We've seen this in private servers, like there was one on WoW that was WoW Classic Hardcore or something like that, and even in games like Path of Exile. Ranked leaderboards for those who want to participate, single death in your character is locked and unplayable. Both PvE and PvP deaths will count, and as the dedicated players progress to best in slot, they will need something harder to do. Some players may even want to do this from the beginning and not play the softcore mode at all. This could even be held with like certain titles for achieving certain ranks within the season, or other kind of cosmetic rewards that could be transferred to softcore mode. I don't know, there's a lot of things they could do with this, and I think it would be really cool to see that even be tested. But if you have any questions you want me to ask the dev team when I chat with them in Discord, make sure you drop your questions down in the comments, and I'll try to get direct replies from the devs or anybody else in the community with really good information, and I'll make a Q&A video later with the community's questions and concerns. Now we move on to crafting. Crafting and professions in Ashes will once again be using the idea of a pretty standard system that I think will be fairly easy for most players to grasp. All professions and life skills in Ashes will be referred to as artisan classes. They are split up into 3 different main categories. These categories are gathering, processing, and crafting. Gathering professions, which are currently consisting of fishing, herbalism, lumberjacking, mining, and animal taming. When the game finally launches, I'll be taking a different approach personally than most games I've played in the past where I just rushed content, where I will be looting and harvesting every single thing I walk across once I have the ability to do so. These early game materials will be essential for crafting and processing, or even use them as bartering materials to trade for better gear. I personally think I'll also master a gather skill, personally, to generate additional raw resources instead of using a crafting profession to master, which will require most people with a master gathering to create the best crafts anyways. This is going to create a bottleneck waiting for the gatherers to obtain the materials in order to craft. Now, how the master system and how you're going to be able to rank things up is still being discussed. I've heard numerous things, and I'm not really gonna dig too deep into it since it is most likely going to be changed, but they originally talked upon only being able to master one regardless of what category it was, and now they're talking about possibly being able to master one in each category. So we will see what happens there, but I would take all of that information there with a grain of salt, because whatever it is not finalized and will be updated later in a video. A good side note though, if you kill a Tolnar, do you get cooking experience for a successful kill? This is a question for Steven. I want an answer, our entire Discord wants an answer, and this information is crucial. Gathering resource nodes will work like we have seen in many other games, where your average resource is a one-time use and will despawn and respawns in random locations or are publicly shared. So if someone else beats you to it, you're out of luck. However, different tier resources will require higher level tools to gather, so it could be extremely beneficial to your financial status early game to be one of the first people harvesting certain type of material to trade or sell to all the people working on their crafting professions. Higher gathering levels will also increase your chance to get a special proc for a rare gathering material. There will also be large vein gatherings for the community to all partake in, and they will have a large number of resources that can be harvested. Obviously, the more people to show up, the quicker the vein will deplete, but this could be very beneficial to a person who is first there and calls out to the guildies to get there before anyone else gets there. I'm sure the response time on these will be extremely quick, and there's no exact number on saying how many materials they can produce once harvested or how long they will last. Once they despawn, they will respawn in a different area fully replenished and ready to be harvested again. These can be veins of all gathering types, from herds of animals to large plants or large mining rocks. Processing classes will be very similar to BDO and many other games, where it's the process of refining your raw materials into a more specific resource for certain crafts, player houses, and many other systems. Crafting classes would be broken down into even more categories. These categories are alchemy, armor smithing, blacksmithing, carpentry, cooking, jewel crafting, scribes, shipbuilding, siege weapons, and weaponsmithing. And these are just the crafting classes that are going to be released upon initial release, and they are subject to increase in the future. Cooking will be a profession that is extremely useful in this game, and the higher you're cooking, the stronger food you can make, which will give you stronger food buffs for a longer time. These can also be enhanced using furniture in your player-owned housing. Furniture inside your housing will also have other uses for a lot of the crafting classes as well. One really cool thing that I truly enjoy is that you'll be able to truly master one of the artisan classes. You can progress in many, but for high-end crafts and resources, you can only specialize in one. This will encourage the community to work together and barter with each other, as well as promote positive social interaction. Ashes of Creation also has full intent to keep crafting relevant for the entire game's existence. What we see in most MMOs is that crafted gear is only for early games, and eventually the raid and dungeon gear always far surpasses the crafting gear, and that won't be the case in Ashes. Ashes will also have a really unique mount breeding system that will allow you to breed mounts together to make totally unique mounts, which I'm also really excited for. As far as races go, Ashes of Creation is following a rather standard format as far as races go, but is taking an absolutely mind-blowing approach to making it every gamer's dream. At the moment, Ashes of Creation plans on having 9 different playable races at launch. Basically, each main category will have 2 different subcategories you can choose from. There will be humans, dwarves, elves, and orc, each of which have 2 categories of each. And then finally the Tulnar, which we don't have much information on and won't until they release Alpha 2 testing. Each of these will have their own unique racial passives called augments, which are currently still in the development and are unknown at the time. Each race will also have different base stats, which are expected to be minimal differences, but could be a thing some are interested in for min-maxing. Ashes will also have religions that will have their own pros and cons, and you'll be able to be changed with some effort. Religions can also grant new augments to your build once fully mastered. We don't have much extra information on this right now, but this adds to even more excitement for the class customization. There will be no gender locking for any race at the moment, and no intent to do so into the future. Every race can be played as every class, so this will lead to some amazing customization and versatility. For the role players, this can also add some really unique experiences. Like we have seen in many mobile games, but very few console or PC games. This game will also have a marriage mechanic. It is currently unknown what this will provide, but it is guessed to be linked to potential buffs and storyline questing. The class system of Ashes of Creation is something that I'm super excited about. It gives me a Path of Exile and Wrath of the Lich King WoW vibes. You'll have 8 primary class archetypes at launch. You start out by picking one of these 8 to start your journey. At the moment, these 8 plan to be Bard, Cleric, Fighter, Mage, Ranger, rogue, summoner, and tank. Once you reach a certain level, you'll then be able to pick a subclass out of those same 8 primary archetypes. Depending on which one you decide to pick, you will get a totally unique result. For example, a mage followed by a fighter secondary would give you a battle mage. A mage followed by a summoner would give you a warlock. Or a ranger followed by a summoner will give you a falconer. At launch, there will be a possibility of 64 different possible outcomes with a plan for more expansion in the future, leaving even more diversity. Even with this many combinations, Ashes will be based on the fairly basic Trinity system of tank, healer, and DPS. With there being instance dungeons and raids, I will more likely play a tank as my starting class since there will be a most demand for dungeons and raids. You will not ever be able to change your class's primary role without making a new character. However, you can change your class's secondary role, but it will require a fair bit of in-game effort or in-game resources. Weapons and armor will not be class locked, meaning every class can use every weapon. This seems more beneficial on the RP side of things to me, as a melee character isn't going to want to use a wand and a mage isn't going to want to use a bow, but this allows for even more character customization and build diversity. Gear will have different enchants available with different intentions behind each enchant, some being PvE based, PvP based, or even for different builds. This follows the same structure with skill points for abilities, as well as multiple different augments. I'm super excited for this level of customization. There's also going to be an RNG based risk first reward system when it comes to enchants and improving gear with gear decay and destruction. Decay happens when you die or when you fail enchants, and certain other mechanics from the game. Item decay will make for huge demand for crafters and master crafters to supply the materials for improving and repairing item decay. I'm really looking forward to this, as PvPers will more than likely need to get along with life skillers instead of being a long-term hate against each other in most games. Ashe's combat system is said to be a hybrid between action combat and tab targeting. The combat system is still in development, but by rumor, players will be able to choose up to 75% of action or tab target skills, and the rest will be the alternative. As we get deeper into the alpha and beta testing, the system will be developed more and more. Steven said in one of his most recent interviews that they are looking for all the feedback they can get on this, so don't be afraid to leave your opinion in the comments. I personally think Black Desert had the best combat system out of any game most people have played. Most of my friends in the Black Desert stayed playing it for no reason other than the smoothness of the combat system and how well everything flowed. I think if Ashes follows a similar structure or somehow makes it even better, I think this would be really cool. I think if they made most of the abilities action based but had tab targeting for things like CC, heals, or support abilities of some sort, this would be the best approach in my opinion. I'm also curious to see how the open world mob density is. We'll be able to cast damage over time abilities on several mobs at once. Will single target abilities have splash damage? If I cast a fireball, will it also hit all the enemies around in an explosion radius for lesser damage? And I don't know, I'm just really excited to see what they end up finalizing. When getting started out in Ashes of Creation, on day 1, you'll get to pick one of your 8 primary classes and your race. Each race has its own starting zone, but you'll be given a choice to spawn at one of the 4 starting zones. These are not mandatory to do, and you can start out and immediately go and venture or gather if that's what you're planning to do. Upon initial release, the world is expected to be nearly 500 square miles in size. The land is supposed to be extremely diverse, giving nearly every type of land and terrain imaginable, from mountains to deserts to swamps and rainforests. Different zones will also have different climate possibilities and seasons that can potentially give certain buffs and debuffs. There will also be an additional underrealm location. Much like Black Desert, there's expected to be a fog on your map until all of the areas have been discovered. This is actually pretty standard in most games. Even going back to WoW, your map was unlocked in increments as you discovered it, so it shouldn't really be a new concept to many. As far as leveling goes, it's expected for your average player to take 180 hours minimum of gameplay in order to reach level 50. I'm sure this is going to be progressive and we'll see long periods of time before level 40 to 50 instead of it taking 4 hours to hit level 2. There are plenty of mounts you obtain and create in this game, but flying mounts themselves will be a rare scenario. You can get a flying mount from being a guild leader or of a guild that holds a territory castle, like how Black Desert gave specifically costumes that granted 1k HP to guild leaders of a castle. Mayors of some nodes will be able to have flying mounts and possible flying mounts from world bosses. With fast travel being very limited in this game, these mounts will be extremely sought after and probably have a high level of competition for them at all times. We also have word of artifacts being in the game that will be extremely rare, and only one of them can be on the server at all times, and only one player can have it. This player will have a duration and a durability on it, and once that artifact breaks, it will then be respawned into the world for somebody else to get. Alright, so that's going to wrap up my first Ashes of Creation video. Make sure to leave any comments, questions, or concerns down below in the comments. Make sure you subscribe, and don't forget to use that referral code if you are going to play the game. Also, make sure you tune into my Twitch. As soon as I get access into the alpha testing, I will be streaming full time. And may the RNG gods bless you today. Take care.